And we're live. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me tonight again. So, yeah, good to be back with you. Loads to talk about tonight. Actually, do you know what? I'll take it back. There's one thing I'm going to talk about tonight. Tonight's going to be a more single issue thing. I just want, yeah, what was I on about? Loads to talk about. There's one issue I want to talk about. I want to talk loads about it, or a bit about it. So I suppose I don't have to introduce many different subjects. It is basically the question of the local elections. Long story short, I'll give you. Um, that basically anyone in Ireland, this is just the entire stream. I'm about to give you the crux of it, but there's detail to follow, so stick with me. Is that I was shocked to discover this in a way, that anyone can vote in Irish local elections, anyone who's residing in the country. Now, I think the implications of that should be obvious to most of you, but I want to get into it in some detail. It's mad. It's really crazy. So I'm going to get into it. It's going to be nice. It's going to be great. It's going to be excellent. But I just want to mention last night's stream as well. I don't know what was going on last night. Is it a big subject? Did I have a good thumbnail? What the story was? Are people just hyped? Or was Kim Jong sending his finest North Korean bots or something like that? Right? That's going to get clipped, of course, and used against me. It's a joke. It's a joke. But there were 1,500 live viewers at the peak, which for a lot of international international big streamers, Americans and stuff like that, maybe wouldn't be much for them. But I was quite, and I'm not bragging, I'm just emphasizing a change in the current at the moment, in the zeitgeist, let's say, because I wouldn't traditionally have gotten that. I don't know. I want to kind of dwell on it for a second. I haven't really gotten that kind of viewage before, but I think people are interested in this now. There's a thirst for content on this because people are sick of watching RTE on it. I can't speak tonight at all. I'm starving, by the way. I don't want to like get into personal stuff, but I'm starving. And this is going to be a good test of what happens when a man live streams when he's starving. I was out all day, all evening with my kids in the sun. Lovely day in here. But yeah, and I came back and I started trying to set up this stream, and so that happened in the place of eating, and everything went wrong. I must have wasted 45 minutes making this dumb thumbnail for it, and I'm not good at this stuff, making the thumbnail for this silly thumbnail for the video. And it's so annoying to do that, get distracted with nonsense, and every little pop-up, every little thing annoyed the hell out of me because I am starving. So every little loading issue on a web page that I was like nearly smashing in my computer, that was fun. But anyway, so that's my day. But regardless, anyway, I'll try to speak coherently. You know, it's like those are big numbers for my streams, basically, traditionally. Now, I did kind of go into the wilderness for a couple of years there, and I came back. And a few months ago, I started trying to stream it kind of in a scatty fashion. And it was weird because, just for anyone who's interested, I I spent a couple of months kind of stumbling along, trying to do streams and being sort of almost nervous or just stiff or something like that. It was hard to get them going. I think I'm getting a bit more used to it, getting back into it. So I was kind of thinking, am I getting better at it, or are events changing, or is it like North Korean bots, or what's going on? But either way, it was 1,500 viewers. Obviously an organic thing, I suppose, for the most part. I think there's this meme now of trolls like doing Slava Russia or whatever. I don't really know. I'm not sure. I see the chats. I see a super chat. Someone telling me not to starve. I'll get back to that in a while. Thanks. But anyway, obviously you can super chat and you can follow my link. Follow me on social media. Support the channel if you want to. I don't want anyone to feel under pressure to do so. Only if you can, and if you whatever. So I really should get into the subject here. This will be a big the fall from grace from last night's stream if I'm just totally off the wall here and can't speak. Yeah, it's just a big thing. Ireland is a country like the Republic anyway, or let's say 6 million, 5 million, 7 million, whatever, somewhere there. That's a small population, and I tend to direct all my commentary and all my rhetoric and stuff to Ireland. I intentionally will put Ireland into all kind of my tweets and stuff. If I left them general, they could go to a bigger international audience, but I like to focus it on Ireland. I don't quite know why. I suppose it's just where I'm from and what I'm aimed at. But I kind of make a point of doing that. I intentionally, in a sense, reject the bigger clout of like directing things at the most general audience possible and stuff like that. I stick to Ireland, and in my streams, if you look at my live streams of the last few weeks and months, yeah, every title is Ireland this, Ireland that. I could just say migration fiasco in the West or whatever. I don't do that, and most of my audience, I haven't checked, but are Irish, I suppose. So that's kind of a lot in that context, you know. So I don't know. I found that interesting. Now, look, we'll see where we go. Maybe tonight I'll end up with like 20 viewers and it'll be the same in the future. And that was a once off. Anyway, the subject at hand, this voting thing, let's just get into it. I'll screen share. Here we go. So yeah, that was a big long load of shite rambling away. Sorry, lads. I'm refining my practice here. So I just want to start basically on this. Oh, this page is so cluttered. Let's go to nice web page, Immigrant Council of Ireland. So I'll explain it to you via all these tabs and web pages, kind of. So, and by the way, last True Gale, I saw him in the chat there. I'm glad his stream was over by the time I started. He was streaming a while ago. There's just to go back to what I was talking about just a minute ago. There were a lot of people streaming tonight, Ninja Knight and Philip Dwyer, and all of these people are streaming now, competitive space. And I'm glad Last True Gale was finished, but I wouldn't be holding up for it in general. I'm sure he wouldn't in reverse, nor anybody else. It's a competitive ecosystem. People are all basically any given night. There's naturally going to be 4 or 5 people streaming, and it just is what it is. Basically, people do their streams, but I don't know. I suppose that's a good thing. So many people are doing it. So much content out there. It's just great that everybody's at it. Okay, I'll stop detouring. Let's just talk about this. So, anybody in Ireland can vote, basically, and let's just read what the Immigrant Council. I've been over this kind of organizations like this a million times. I don't have their annual reports up. Let's just say they're funded heavily, largely by the state and by billionaire so-called philanthropies and all of that. So they're a regime institution funded. So they say here, as a reminder to migrants, did you know you can vote in local elections? Every resident in Ireland, regardless of their nationality, can vote in local elections, usually held every 5 years in May. Also, every resident in Ireland, regardless of their nationality, can run as a candidate in elections, in the local elections. The next locals are in May 2024. I thought they were June. Am I losing the plot? I'm getting so many mixed messages here from all these sources tonight. I can always be corrected after the fact. Am I going mad? It's June, no? Anyway, so that's them. And then you go to check the register, which is the like voting registration app in Ireland. And they say, because I was just figuring this out just today, basically. And they say to be eligible to vote in local elections in June 2024, you must have reached the age of 18 on polling day and be living in the state. Okay, so you must be an adult and you must be living in the state. So living in the state, that's your criteria. And they put it, how did they put it? Every resident, regardless of the nationality, can vote. So that's pretty straightforward language there, right? Every resident, anyone who's living in Ireland, as Check the Register said. So that's kind of just going straight to the source, checking what they're saying. That's how it is. Yeah, I think the chat's agreeing with me. June 7th is the day. So, I mean, these guys are funded by the state and they're getting the dates wrong. Come on, lads. You know, anyway. So I wanted to go to... I have like 4 or 5 tabs here, a couple of videos, a couple of sources, a bit of fun and all that. Not fun, but like go through different kind of things. And I was trying to figure out how to order it. And I think it's important to start with this, and I'll big it up for you. So, oh my God, what a horrible webpage. Look at that, all those ads. It's like headache stuff. So this is an article from 2022. And it's kind of, I mean, the title has got such like venom in it, I think. And this is extra.ie. And bear in mind, Listún Varna was my kind of coming of age in this activism stuff. I did the Listún Varna beat originally. This was my first thing. So when I went there, they were in the throes of this migrant plantation sort of beginning. I think there might have been some going on before that, but when I went there and I sort of stuck my head out on that, or my neck out, it was the beginning of the big plantations in Listún Varna. It's not that they had, I assume, no foreigners but up to that point, but this was the first major plantation I'm aware of in Listún Varna. So up until that point, we can assume that Listún Varna was just Listún Varna, just as for those who aren't Irish, let's say, a small heritage town famous in the west of Ireland in Clare. So and I actually, before that time, I had been to the festival, the matchmaking festival. I'm glad I got there before the town was destroyed. Anyway, so it's ironic that this is Listún Varna here, but it's a good example. The headline is "The Irish Town with Such a Big Heart That Ukrainians Now Outnumber Locals." I mean, that has to be, that caption headline has to be venomous, I would say. Yeah, I'm not even going to read it, whatever. It is what it is. But I should have brought a source on this, but from what I know in Listún Varna, they are, I'm just going to take that like webpage down. Ugh. I'll just take it away entirely for now. From what I know, Listún Varna is 1/3 Irish now. I could be corrected. Could it be 40%? Could it be slightly less than 30 or a third? I don't know. Thereabouts. That's Listún Varna now. And as I've said before, the third of the population in Listún Varna who are Irish are old and let's not use the word decrepit, but they're older. They're at home. They're watching RTE. They're going for their health checks and their nebulizers and all that. They're past it a little bit, right? Largely. And the young, sprightly, active, childbearing population are the other 2/3. So it's both the quantity and the quality, we'll say, in terms of age and dynamism, is skewed against Listún Varna totally. I mean, that's what can you even say about that? And that's just to set the stage, because when you're talking about local elections, I believe there's like 900 councillors. Anyone can correct me after the fact if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that with councillors, there are like 900 around the country. And so it's like, it's very granular, in terms of, you vote for a TD for a large, like half of a county area. An MEP is for like Ireland South, everywhere from Galway to Dublin and down, massive area. Small numbers of people can be successful as candidates for that. Whereas councillors, they're all over the country. You basically have, like, for example, Derek Bly, along with MEP, is running for councillor for Fermoy local authority, local area or whatever. And you would have, I don't know, something like the Listún Varna local area. It might be Listún Varna and a greater area around it or something. But it's very granular. It's very small, local, as you would imagine. And there are a lot of them. And it's sort of an interesting thing, because councillors don't have the power of a TD or an MEP. They don't have the soapbox of that, but they do have a direct connection with what goes on in the town. So they sort of, it's a mixed bag as per the power they have. And I suppose I'll get into it. There was an article from John McGurk on Gript like a week ago or something. It was good. He was, you can go find it, credit where it's due and all that, but he was talking about how a councillor had called to his door. That's a long story. Basically, what he ended up getting into is dispelling the myth that councillors are only interested in potholes locally and some stuff like that, and they don't, in terms of the grander policies, immigration, climate change, what else is there? Trade, energy policy, whatever it is, they've no impact on the grander form of governance on a national scale. And he was sort of dispelling that myth. And I'll just give you some like bullet points of it. Basically, that what he mentioned, I mean, these are just the facts, but he's the one who put them across, is that local councillors across Ireland elect most of the Seanad, so the Senate in Ireland. They elect 42 out of 60 of them. They also, and this was actually a commenter, again, you can fact check me on this if you want, but a commenter under that article gave their own piece and said that they play a role, or they have an influence in terms of planning permissions, business licensing, housing allocation, employers, and they can be large employers in the municipal services and contracting. So like they do have a sort of a hands-on role in a way that TDs in a sense don't. I'm not saying that TDs don't matter more, but councillors taken as a whole can actually have a big hands-on role locally. I've seen, and again, I don't know all the ins and outs, the fine print of exactly what a councillor is, nor will I'm not the guy to bring you the fine print on that, right? Anyone can look it up if they want to, but my impression of councillors over the years, when I've been going around the country years ago to these plantation centres and these big hooplas about plantation centres and the back and forth of it all, people registering fire cert complaints, planning issues, all of this stuff. And what you would always have, for better or for worse, is that when the crowd are down there, hypothetically with the pitchforks out, the crowd out, the town square filled with aggrieved people or whatever, whether it's a hall or otherwise, or whatever it is, it was always the councillor was the man on the front line that the people would kind of call. He'd end up down there and he'd have the mic in front of him like, and he would be sort of either spinning a yarn full of shite because he's some kind of Fine Gael underling or whatever, or he was kind of slightly taking their side. But either way, he was the point man. He was the first point of contact between a large crowd of people who are upset about something, and he'd say, well, I've written to the minister, I've this, I've that, I'm looking at this, the fire cert safety. You know, he would actually be very relevant. Now, would he have much power to push back on the state and all that? Maybe not, but at least he was the guy who was by default vested the power by the community to be their first point of contact and their sort of what's the word, messenger boy between them and the state in some kind of fashion. And that's, to me, that matters, because whether they ultimately have the power, the actual power to make some difference or not in a specific situation, they have power just by being seen as a natural sort of conduit for the community within the democratic framework or whatever as it is. And so take, for example, if it was, I mean, I don't think I'm going to be a councillor anytime soon, but say I were a councillor, instead of just being some activist who's talking away, let's just hypothetically, in a few years or something, if I were a councillor and then something like this happened, well, you can see how like suddenly I have this platform, this sort of role, this influence, this ability to get letters between the state or back and forth with the state, the ability to basically look at the inner workings of the whole thing, and you have ultimately some clout and some right to kind of probe government and the whole infrastructure of it. And so if you're basically, just that's why it matters, I think, long story short. So, you know, if you basically put it this way, if your councillor were some sort of unhinged, like blue-haired, you know, they them activist in a local town, that'd be kind of weird, you know, because just to take an extreme weird example, or if your councillor were a CCP spy or something, it's kind of like, well, that wouldn't be good to have someone who has their fingers in the pie at a very local level, who is just completely detached from the town and the local area, doesn't even really know anyone, has divergent interests from the majority of the people there. Why is this, like, literal, in this hypothetical example, foreign spy here? You can debate how much power do they have or not, but just they have some power and they have some influence, and it's very direct. It's not like, in a way, I'd rather have a CCP, let's say, spy as an MEP than like a bunch of them in all these little towns directly hands-on with communities, if you get what I mean. So again, people say as you go down the hierarchy, there's less power, but there's a sense I have that, well, no, you're more plugged in, you're more connected. And so there should be an actual, if anything, an MEP being slightly more alien seems more fitting and normal than local councillors being totally alien. Local councillors have always traditionally been, again, better or worse, the gombeen man, the local fella, the wheeler dealer, the guy who's an undertaker and a carpenter, and he's at all the funerals, you know, showing the face, and he's a bit of a snake, but he's definitely kind of local, he's known, you know. So it's very strange that this is happening. This what's going on here. So I'm just setting the tone there with the power that these councillors have. Again, they basically elect the Seanad. Now, the Seanad is a soapbox for activists and all of this. You see, there's like, they get the token so-called working class person, they get the token foreigner, they, all of these different interests, they get in there. IDA, or sorry, IFA and all, they get their people in there. Like, it is like, put it this way, you could argue how much power a councillor or a senator has or whatever, but I can tell you that, sure, if I was a senator, I would be in there in whatever capacity I can, advancing the interests of the stuff I talk about, migration, replacement, you know, and other issues like perhaps, you know, medical issues like, you know, that came up in 2020 and all that kind of stuff, or carbon tax, all these other things. I would bring them up. I would be a champion for the interests that I talk about within the Seanad, and that comes with a certain amount of power. Here's another thing as well, by the way. Again, I've never claimed to be, I've always been totally honest that I'm allergic to the sort of the machinery of like the ins and outs of kind of political bureaucracy. I'm not your guy for that, right? I'm not the guy for it. But am I correct in remembering that when Conor McGregor floated the idea of running for president, people said, oh, no, you can't, because you need Shannon to kind of elect you or like nominate you. There's a process where you can either have the Shannon nominate you or a bunch of local councils nominate you, some kind of little thing like that. And if they're all sort of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and you're not going to get them because Conor McGregor's like a firebrand and sort of edgy and all of that. You know, maybe Michael McDowell could get it, or maybe whoever else could get it. But Conor McGregor, people, they'll all hold their nose, and they'll all not hold their nose, but they will all they'll be allergic to that. They won't do it. And again, so let's say you're a participant in the democracy, a citizen, and you say, well, I want Conor McGregor to be president, which as it happens, I do. And you say, I want Conor McGregor to be president, and I'm told that the council, he would need Shannon or councils to elect him or nominate him, and they are all kind of frosty on that, as we can see. Maybe they wouldn't do it. It's not feasible. Well, I want to change that. So I'm going to sit down, roll up my sleeves, and I'm going to figure out how to advocate within the marketplace of ideas for, if the councillors won't do it, I want to change the councillors via advocating for the ideas and campaigning and all of that kind of stuff. Or I want to, and I also want to change the Seanad. And to change the Seanad, you have to change the councillors and the councils. So if I want Conor McGregor to be president and it's not feasible with the current zeitgeist in the political machinery, then, well, I'm going to set about now grinding away at that, me and my 1,000 friends or people who agree with me or whatever it is. So in that sense, and of course the president, while a largely symbolic role, does have the power to send bills back to the Dáil and all of this. So it's like, again, the level at which councillors matter raises from potholes to national interests very quickly when you're talking about whether Conor McGregor is or isn't the president, etc. Never mind the Seanad. So it does matter, actually. It might not matter for one councillor here or there, but taken as a whole, it starts to matter. Especially for niche interests. So if we are niche interests, let's say about migration and all this kind of stuff, like a fringe or radical or not yet in the center issue politically, then we want to start by having 5 councillors, and then we want to go further and nominate a senator and all this kind of stuff. Well, if you want to start at that, then it's very important that the groundwork for being able to do that, the democratic sort of landscape is legitimate, and it maintains a certain form of legitimacy. And of course, you know where I'm going with this. It's losing it rapidly here with these local elections. The fact that anyone and their dog from whatever Algeria can vote. So I'll put the screen back up there, let's say, and just get into the next kind of piece here. So here we have, and a friend of mine sent me this on today, who was following the Ukrainians in Ireland, the lead, I think it's the lead Ukrainians in Ireland Telegram group, where they talk about like, and I've seen this kind of stuff. There's the Ukrainians in Ireland group, and then there's the Ukrainians in Portlaoise group, or the Ukrainians in wherever it is group. And they basically, they'll do everything from talking about where the best deals are in shops, or they'll remind each other, oh, don't forget, because of the bank holiday this night, Thursday, bins go on Thursday, and all this, everything then from advocating for like extra funding from the US or the EU to Ukraine for their pointless war, which is killing Ukrainians like by the 10,000. Anyway, it's a Ukrainian interest group, like, strongly, and they make no bones about it. Like, you know, in Ireland, if you advocate for Irish people specifically, I saw recently there was a charity shop somewhere in Ireland that had a sign on their window saying something like proceeds go to Irish homeless. It was something like that. And one of these Antifa groups, or some sort of activist NGO group or whatever, was basically trying to dox this shop and get them in trouble for saying proceeds go to Irish homeless. And I remember just thinking, well, what's wrong with that? And there was a big debate in the thread, and it was like, they were like, well, you know, you shouldn't advocate only for your own people. That's what makes you far right. It's far right to have this sign in the window. And I said, well, is it far right when Chinese and Ukrainians and Indians and Roma gypsies and Muslims and all this kind of stuff, is it far right when they advocate for their own interests? Because they do it without any compunction. So what's the logic here? Is it far right in general as a principle, or is it just far right when Irish people do it? Or is it's only far right to do it because you're the majority in the country? It's only far right because you're native to the country. Well, what about when we're not a majority, which is rapidly occurring and will be over within the next 20 years unless something changes? Is it still, does it become not far right for us to advocate for our own interests when we become 49% of the population? There's no logic to it. We know, I'm preaching to the choir here, you know, but you know, it's just and this is the example for you. So I'll pull it up. So this is from the Telegram group, the like overall group in Ireland for these Ukrainians. But it also was, I don't really need to show you, do I? I mean, let's just read it to you. But it's also, it was on local groups. A couple of people I know spotted it on local groups, so in just towns. So like I say, it could be the Tullamore, the Athlone, whatever Ukrainian group thing. So it's reshared around. And now this is a translation, auto-translation from Ukrainian to English. This is the original Ukrainian, just auto-translated. So maybe there's a lag in the translation and I'm not quite getting it perfect, but you know, it's probably close enough, right? So it goes as follows. A chance to influence, vote in the local elections 2024. In 2024, local council elections await us in Ireland. The opportunity to take part in voting continues even for those Ukrainians who are temporarily under protection. Why is this important? First, by voting, we have the opportunity to elect representatives who support and strive for the development of Ukraine. Secondly, it will allow us to keep Ukrainian issues at an important place in the agenda. It's an awkward translation. To participate in the upcoming elections, you must register in the voter register now. The procedure is extremely simple and available on this link. Click here. Do not forget to support Ukraine with your vote. Your active participation is an important step on the way to supporting Ukrainian interests in Irish society. So we have the opportunity to elect representatives who support and strive for the development of Ukraine. Now, this is an Irish election. So what's going on there? It will allow to keep it will keep Ukrainian issues important on the agenda, and your participation is an important step to supporting Ukrainian interest in Irish society. I mean, like, to call that a fifth column is just like stating the most obvious thing ever. I mean, again, if I went to Simon Harris or someone like that, some regimist figure, they would kind of like go, that's nonsense. Everyone has a right to participate in our democracy and I support it. And the more people who are enfranchised, the better the democracy and all this. Of course, these people are talking out their asses. The reality is that that's, of course, a fifth column. I mean, they might as well be saying, hello, fifth column here. Nice to meet you. Like, you know, we're in Ireland. the democracy in Ireland is meant to exist I mean, it's painful in a sense. I like being on here talking to you, right? This is good. But there's a sense in which it's painful to have to sort of like talk about this stuff. And because it's so rare, and the reason I get to stream and because anyone watches it all is because you don't get this on RT, you don't get it anywhere else. And yet when you are tasked and you've elected yourself or decided to comment on this stuff like I'm doing now, you're left with this kind of thing of like looking at the complete obvious and having to sort of state it, which is weird. And yet then it's totally unique because you could find probably publicly about 40 people in the whole country who come out with their name and face and just say it. So it is important, but it's also strange. It's like, you're left with like baby step kind of stuff. Like, okay, so we're in Ireland. Ireland, even still under official auspices, is a nation state, as is Ukraine, as is Oman, right? We have nation states, and within that nation state, we have a population, and each nation state has a democracy and infrastructure and institutions that advocate for their own interests within that territory, usually connected to a people, either directly or tenuously in some way. And this is crazy. And so the democracy, you have the legitimacy of the governing ruling class is based on the fact that you have a democracy in which people can express their grievances and advocate for change peacefully so that they don't need to go out with pitchforks and all of that. I kind of talked about this last night, but that's how the democracy works. That's how in the West, particularly, the governing elite, complex and corrupt as it is, that's their mandate for legitimacy, that well, even if it's the media is totally corrupted and it's NGOs, no matter what it is, no matter what criticism we have to make of it, they say, well, at the end of the day, you don't have to go feral because no matter how corrupt you accuse us of being, you do have a vote and you get to exercise that vote. And if you want to, like someone like Simon Harris would say, well, if you really want to stop immigration, don't come to me crying about it. You could elect a government. And he would say that sort of cynically and glibly because he knows the whole thing is tied up and corrupt anyway. But he's like saying, someone like that would be saying, well, technically you can. So, why don't you just go away and advocate your interests and we'll stay here with our NGOs and RT and everything. And you go off. And if if your arguments are persuasive, then maybe you'll get into government. And so that's basically why, people don't need to go French Revolution mode. That's kind of the dynamic. That's the argument at play. Well, again, it's kind of thematic and similar to what I was speaking about last night. That animal elections, you can debate the importance, the relevancy of those. I've discussed it already. They are actually relevant and they are a legitimate and important part of our democratic machinery. So if you have this situation where anyone who's resident in Ireland can vote, and you have a situation where in Ukraine or in Listún Varna, 2/3 of the population are foreigners, probably many of whom are Ukrainians. I mean, yeah, Ukrainians outnumber locals. And it could be other foreign groups as well, which I'll get onto. Again, the trouble with stating the obvious is it's kind of difficult. It's like what to even say. You have a situation where this majority group can elect their own person, or even not elect their own person, like some Ukrainian to be councillor, but they can elect the Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil guy because he has come to them and said, I'm already a total NATO pro-Ukraine hawk. I can't do more for Ukraine. I'm all about it. I'm totally anti-Irish. I'm totally pro bringing in more Ukrainian refugees, regardless of the context. And I'm pro standing up to Putin or whatever it is. So they don't necessarily have to vote for their own Ukrainian person. They can just vote for the Ukrainian shill or whatever it is, the person who promises them to be the foreign interest candidate, effectively, their interest, which is synonymous with electing a Ukrainian nationalist or something. It's the same thing. And they can do that. Bear in mind, like, if let's say in Listún Varna there's a population of 1,000 people and 250 of them are Ukrainians. If they all because they're allowed to advocate in an identitarian fashion, unrestrained. So they can openly on and all public groups and even in the newspaper probably say, vote for this guy, he stands for Ukraine. And they can put it into all their chat groups and basically vote as a block for this person. What does that do to the Irish vote, where some of them are voting for the person who wants to stop immigration, the radical candidate, and some of them are voting for the radical Marxist whatever candidate, and some of them are voting for Fianna Fáil. It's split, right? It's chaotic, and yet the Ukrainian vote, they're not sitting down thinking, will I vote for Paul Murphy, Derek Bly, or will I vote for Fianna Fáil Gambino or the other one? Like, they're not sitting down evaluating the policies of all these people, and they're just looking strictly at the Ukrainian issue. And if that was seen as, oh well, you're just painting in broad brushstrokes, I'm just reading their own stuff here. So it basically renders, let's be real, it renders the Irish vote in Listún Varna, for example, totally useless. And the Irish vote is both a third of the population of their own town, so that's the quantitative side, and qualitatively, the Irish identity has been sort of demonized and scattered by the media, so that it actually you can't have an Irish group where we say we're all going to vote for the Irish interest openly and publicly and all of that. So the Irish people don't get that right, we'll say, and so it's diffuse and scattered, and the 1/3 of the population that does exist is divided down even more, right? So we got a problem. There's more. I'll show you a video here. There's this Indian guy who does the same. Now it's not as on the nose as the Ukrainian one, but he does mention talking to an Indian candidate on a podcast and all that. It's very clear that, like, I mean, it's obvious they're all about Indian interests.
In Ireland for last 2 years.
By the way, he actually gets it wrong.
And you have been residing in
He gets it wrong. He says that, oh, you have to be residing in Ireland for 2 years to vote in these local elections. As we've seen already, that's not true. So he actually got it wrong. He did his people dirty there, because actually you don't really need to be resident for 2 years anyway. It's not even as stringent as that. But so just filter that out of what he's saying.
So if you're 18 and above and you have been residing in Ireland for last 2 years, this video is for you. In Ireland in 2024, on 7 June, there is local elections happening in which anyone can vote in these elections regardless of what visa status you have been here. All they require is that you are 18 years and above and you have been residing in Ireland for last 2 years. For that, you need to register for this election. So register for this election, you need to go on voters.ie, in which you need to fill up a form with your full name, your IRP, your home address, and all the other basic needs that they need. In the nationality sections, you can select the non-European category and you can upload your recent Irish residency permit on that. The registration will close on 20th of May. So this is your chance to go into the Irish politics and draft your vote in the Irish local elections. I have also done a podcast with one of the Indian origin person who is standing for this local elections, and that podcast will be coming in the month of May.
Okay, so he says himself, I don't need to play any more videos, whatever. He says, I also did a podcast with an Indian origin person and all of this. Again, that's kind of open ethnic, national nepotism, tribalism, whatever. Again, if you do that in Ireland, that's what I do. That's what all of us people do, basically. If you do that in Ireland, you're far right, you're blacklisted, you're sacked from your job, you're whatever else. You're persecuted and marginalized and all that. But this guy does it fine. No problem. Oh, he's talking to an Indian origin person. So like, oh, all of us Indians are getting together on how we're going to vote and all that. And we're going to vote probably for an Indian, like he said, an Indian origin candidate. And let me just go back to something here. It said in the Immigrant Council thing, every resident, regardless of nationality, can vote, usually held every 5 years. Also, every resident in Ireland, regardless of their nationality, can run as a candidate. So you can be here a hot minute in Ireland in a plantation centre. You can run for local election. And if you're, let's say, an Algerian or a Ukrainian or whatever, and you've been put into this small town area where, as it happens, there's 200 other Algerians. You've noticed that there's actually a lot of your own kind there. And so you register as a candidate, and then you just go to all your Algerian buddies and your Algerian WhatsApp groups, and you say, all right, what's the crack, lads? I'm going for election. So like, it doesn't matter what my policy is. There is no policy. My policy is our people or whatever. and they say, well, I'm running now, so basically you're all going to vote for me, just purely for the most tribal, animal level, racial solidarity. You're all just going to vote for me without even thinking about it. If you're in a town of 600 people and, well, you get 100 Algerian votes, and then the 250 people who are Irish some are voting Fianna Fáil in all different ways. It's not hard to see how, well, yeah, if they all block vote for the Algerian, he might get in. And suddenly you have a case where you're living in Ballybollocks, which until about 7 years ago was just totally Irish. And you had Willie fucking, Donnelly or whatever, rubbing his hands together outside a mass or whatever, or outside all the funerals, and say what you want about that. At least he's kind of local anyway. People could relate with him. Suddenly you have Yusuf, Panini or whatever, is elected. He's your councillor, right? So you're thinking, what? And so what happens with the next Plantation? And you call up your councillor to say, I need you to push back on this, right to Roderick O'Gorman. It's Mr. Panini, right? What are you going to do? Like, this is insane, really, when you think about it. And of course, he then or she is going to be able to vote for senators. And so if he gets elected, and then up in County Sligo, there was actually another similar situation happened with an Algerian or whatever it happens to be, they can contact each other and say, we're going to actually try and run a Algerian into the Shannon. It's nuts, and of course, meanwhile, the Irish vote is completely scattered and weak and confused. And the only case where it's not scattered, weak and confused, where Irish people are actually playing the same game openly, they're called far right and demonized. So that's your Indian and your Ukrainian and the rest of it. Now there's more, because not only is it I'm preaching to the choir, a lot of this, but not only that, but here we have a few days ago this thing called Abolish Direct Provision Ireland campaign. Now I don't know how, are they being honest? Whatever, who are they exactly? Look, we don't quite know. It's a Twitter page really, but they have 8,000 followers. They seem to be a sort of bona fide, however you say that, sort of activist group. And they said, we just registered over 1,500 refugees in direct provision to vote in Ireland local elections in June. Every single one of them promised not to vote for the Green Party. We won't be forgetting Minister O'Gorman and his terrible racism, laughing my ass off. But, so they're claiming that they, like, even whether, I'm just taking it at face value, but even if you're like, well, did they or didn't they? Is that true? Surely that should be reported to some sort of authority. So you're registering, I mean, we live in Ireland as it is, but you're registering 1,500 refugees in direct provision centres, barely any of whom speak English, and then you're sort of telling them not to vote for a certain party because you're telling them that party is against their interests. So you're registering fake voters, basically. Let's be honest, some guys who don't speak English, or never mind Irish, who are just into a direct provision centre in, City West or Wexford or Courtown or wherever it is, and you're registering them by batches of 1,500. That's like Tammany Hall stuff. That's like basic, classic, sort of. And I can't accuse anyone of election fraud technically, because we live in a corrupt society, and technically it's, I suppose, not illegal, but it's sort of, in a sense, feels fraudulent. And that's some sort of NGO thing. And just to back that up, RMTV, good Twitter page, they quoted an article today. Now, I don't know when this article was released, but it's recent. So it was a voter drive underway. And listen to this. Everything circles back to Liston Varner tonight. He highlighted the bit here. This voluntary initiative will include visits to emergency accommodation, direct provision centres and day services in County Clare. People who have migrated to Clare from other countries, including those from Ukraine, those seeking international protection, etc., will be like targeted or approached about their right to vote and all of that. Now, think of the amount of corruption that's going on there, or the amount of sort of potential corruption that's going on in a situation like that. And who's doing it? Go back to the start of it. 12 of Clare's community organisations. Now, community organisation, again, this, but we're not talking about just like a random neighborhood who have a community neighborhood watch and they get together and they're just, it's totally voluntary. It's an actual community just being a community and forming a group. Community organizations, all right? Um, came together with the support of Clare County Council. Now you go further down the list here and they start talking about who these so-called community groups are. Clare Immigrant Support Centre. Most of these, I'm sure, are funded by the state and billionaires and all that, and corporations, either directly or indirectly. Clare Immigrant Support Centre, Clare Leader Forum, Clare Local Development Company, Clare PPN. That's the one I discovered years ago. Clare Solidarity Network. This is funny. It says Clare LGBTQ+, Clare, etc. And then you go further again, and it mentions Clare PPN coordinator Sarah Clancy. Now she was the one who was emceeing and leading the on the mic along with Teresa Donoghue and some local fool, be real. But 2 out of the 3 of them were NGO connected, not from the town or even the county originally, activists who were working with the Clare PPN, which is a state-funded NGO sort of type of group. And they're like, I mean, they're far left, open borders, whatever it is, activists, right? And they had somehow weaseled their way into the centre with a bunch of normies from Lisdoonvarna, about 200-300 of them, everyone in Lisdoonvarna out at this meeting, and none of them think to ask, well, who are these 2 women who are leading this meeting, who claim to be on our side? Oh, well, they're from the PPN, they're a community group, and no one asks, right? Only I was there to bust them on it. And now she's back again, Sarah Clancy. Clare PPN coordinator Sarah Clancy said, quote, along with all our community worker colleagues, we're reaching out in particular to people who might not know they're entitled to vote in local elections on June 7. Anybody over 18 living in Ireland, la la la. So, of course, her claim would be that, well, I'm just letting people know what their rights are. But of course, this person is probably in and out of refugee centres, in and out of like a finger totally in the pie, a complete activist, and obviously wouldn't, you know, you can imagine wouldn't be saying, well, I mean, it's just nuts. It's like, it's not just, oh, you can vote for anyone. It's like, yeah, you can vote for anyone, but like, here are also the candidates, just out of, you know, if you're curious, who support, you know, your interests, this, that, and the other. You know, so these, it's just, when you think about the depravity of this woman, Sarah Clancy in particular, she was there, standing there, leading the meeting in Lisdoonvarna as they were being replaced in 2017, 18, whenever it was. She was standing there, had weaseled her way into this literal, this was a genuine community meeting, and yet she had weaseled her way in. She's from Galway originally, I think, and a government, a state activist, effectively, via her links to the PPN, and definitely antithetical to the interests of the majority of Lisdoonvarna residents at the time. Completely oppositional, if we're being real. She was there leading that meeting, Pied Pipering them to say, "Oh, we're going to go speak to the government and give, you know, relay your concerns to them." She was doing that, and now she's back, and she's like talking to the migrants about their voting rights after they have become 2/3 of the town. Now, the level of sort of treachery, in my opinion, that's involved in that is actually mind-boggling, even for someone like me. And yet that's what's going on. She's doing voter drives for people who are now this was just Clare in general, but take Lisdoonvarna, a town in Clare, who are now 1/3 of their own population, which she was involved from the start in getting going, let's say. I'm trying to be sort of technical here, but I don't think that could be disputed in any court, right, or case, that cause and effect. She was pro all of these people coming in without limit to Lisdoonvarna, and now they are 1/3 of their population. So I think that's just stating a fact. So, you know, while we're trying to, I'll kind of wrap it up here, but while we're trying to register nationalist candidates around the country and trying to scrape together a couple of 100 votes or 1,000 votes or whatever under the pressure of the state and against the tide a little bit, because of the state interference effectively in media and otherwise. But we're thinking, well, at a local level, if there's a town area with a couple of thousand people, all it takes is ordinarily would be a few hundred people with a shared agenda to take that council seat, and we go from there. But of course, if the town has a plantation center with 400 people in it, or not just that, has a plantation center with a few hundred people, but hundreds of other people who've been filtered out to housing and stuff. So the town is now just like Lisdoonvarna, a third of its own population, we'll say. Well, that's totally beaten back by this migrant plantation vote. Like, again, we come back to what I spoke about last night, which is the sort of increasing illegitimacy of the state as we go. And again, I don't know how long this rule has been in effect that anyone resident in the state is allowed to vote in local elections. If that was the rule, let's just say in 1960, it would be whatever. It's just a technicality of voting, but like, you could have the vote, you could have it that way, or you could have it strictly reserved for citizens and natives. In 1960, it wouldn't have made a difference. It's all the one anyway. What are you going to have? That one Dutch guy who lives down in Bandon is going to vote. Big deal. Fair play to him, right? Or whatever. So it's kind of just whether you agree with the rule or not, it just wasn't consequential and thus not relevant for discussion or to the democratic process or the spirit of democracy. And just the spirit of a community having a say, people having a say. But of course, it's, and here's another analogy, right? So let's say I moved to India for a year doing whatever it is there. Someone's going there to do NGO work, and there's a big election, and it's Modi and the Hindu nationalists, and there's a minority of Muslims, and there's this and that, and there's some liberal, US CIA funded liberal color revolution activists and all this. There's different factions, and they're all hyped up for their local election. And you're the one Irish guy or foreigner living in this city or community or whatever, and you have some Indian friends. And one of them reminds you that, there's this funny quirk to our voting, actually, that actually you can vote as it happens. It'd be a case where you'd go, oh, that's gas. I might actually, do you know what? Maybe I'll vote Modi, actually, or maybe I'll vote whatever. It's kind of funny. I'm going into this Indian election center and I'm voting. This is kind of weird. But it'd be like, that's harmless enough. Like, I'm this one guy, you know what I mean? It's got even the Indians themselves, even the most staunch nationalist Indian would be like, oh, that's funny. Whatever, make your vote, that's very different from when the people of your town over the course of like 10 years have become a third of your own population, and the foreigners are invested in their own ethnic blocks, and their strings are being pulled by these NGO activists, so-called NGO activists, in this racket. It's a very different situation. So it's not even a question of is the rule legitimate or not. Obviously, it's an illegitimate rule. It really is. But the illegitimacy of it becomes pronounced and relevant under the context of our current situation, where we bring in 250,000 foreigners in a year. There are, over the course of a few years, there's pretty much hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have come in here, whatever the number is, so many. And in some towns, they're a huge number. So that's where you start to look at it and you think, you know what? And last night I spoke about the idea of crime punishment, the justice system, the democratic, basically crime punishment, public safety, how that mixes with the migration plantation situation and creates an illegitimacy of the fundamental basis of the state. Well, this in a slightly different way is a case where the democratic response that people have to grievances with the government in Ireland, where in the Republic of Ireland, where it's 5 million people, well, when you're bringing in hundreds of thousands of people regularly, and especially when you're putting these people in little batches by 300, 400, 500, whatever it is, in communities that only have 1,000 people in them, and then that's where the local election bubble, that's your whatever the word is, that's your territory under which you're going to vote. Well, then something like local elections start to become patently illegitimate, and it's another case where, never mind, I mean, there's the public safety, migration, crime and punishment issue, and then there's the democratic issue at a local level, where you have some Ukrainian who your whole town opposed it in the first place. You were overwhelmed by the state and pushed down, and now fast forward 1 or 2 years, and your local councillor is a Ukrainian whose chief interest is Ukrainian interests. I mean, to say that that renders the state, let's say, to say that that affects, severely undermines the legitimacy of the state in the minds of the public, not me, but in the minds of the public, en masse, is an understatement. I mean, what are people meant to make of that? What are people meant to make of that? In one sense, you have some random Algerian who's going around potentially trying to molest a child, and the guards aren't involved, or the guards aren't really there for you. You know the courts aren't there for you. You know the person isn't there in the first place. And without my condoning of it, what ends up happening is that the person gets sparked out on the street and everyone cheers, which I spoke about that last night. It's unfortunate, but that's what's inevitable in a sense. And then people look to their counselor and they just think that's illegitimate too. The whole thing starts to fall apart now very quickly. And again, it starts to go feral because people think, well, I'm not safe. I'm impoverished. I openly have a candidate who's hostile to my interests. Someone who arrived here 2 years ago against the wishes of all of us. Now they are a majority and my elected representative is their person. Now, how do you work with that? What are you meant to do? And again, my appeal, it's not an appeal to the state because I don't like them, but it's like to the average person in the middle, to the state who condemn the far right, and to anyone who's critical of my viewpoint, my retort is, what do you say about that? Are you going to tell me that that is somehow sustainable, tolerable, or I mean, those are my two words, I suppose, for it. But like, what are we meant to do from here? What is an average Irish person meant to do? A person who is barely even a nationalist, just someone who wants to live in a society where they think, well, I have a voice, I have an identity. I thought I had a nation state, and I thought I had, even in some tenuous fashion, an ability to go to the ballot box when all else fails. And if I stir up enough concern among my fellow citizens, we can remedy our issue. And the big issue at the moment, as we've seen, number one in the country, basically, is immigration and these plantations. So it all folds back into itself. It's very troubling. It's completely unsustainable. And as I'm predicting, the wheels are going to come off on this. I saw Jana London today. She was posting about how the question of, like, well, is this just some sort of incompetence by the government letting the whole state fall apart, and social unrest to rise, and the social contract to be broken, and public order to break down, and all of this? She was claiming that, well, no, it's totally intentional. It's the state they're using that as a sort of a problem, reaction, solution type of thing. Look, I don't know. Is that the intention, or that's a separate question? But the fact is that that's the way it's going. And we, unfortunately, are the butt of the joke, whether it's intentional or just incompetence, or whether it's cynicism of local compradors who are merely working for higher ups. Either way, we end up the butt of the joke. We end up the ones who are ruled by foreigners, literally, in our own towns. Your councillor is now a Ukrainian or Algerian who openly claims, let's just go back. Where is it? Openly claims that their vote and potentially candidacy is all about Ukrainian interests in Ireland, Ukrainian interests in general on the international stage, our interests. They say it, not me, they say it. So what are we meant to do with that? Where do we go from there? I mean, again, it's just, I think of this stream as a sort of supplement to my previous one. The breakdown of any basis of a citizen, and especially a native citizen within any state or territory, feeling like they have any stake or influence in their own lives. You take that away and it's chaos. That's what ultimately we're going to see in every different direction. So I suppose I'll leave it there. I just wanted to note as well, to kind of give a white pill to the black pill. This is separate. That today there was a poll that the largest sort of party in Ireland at the moment is Independents and Others. So Independents it could be Independents, or it could be Ireland First, or it could be National Party, or whatever. Any of these Independents and Others would be largely basically Argy's and Argy adjacent people are 24% now of the polled electorate. That's what they're voting for, which is the highest. Sinn Féin 22, Fine Gael 19, Fianna Fáil 16, Independents and Others 24, the leading one, up by 7. The rest are basically all down. So that's positive. I mean, I didn't mean to depress you tonight, but it's sort of like this local election thing is nuts. I feel like it needs to be talked about more. It's I mean, people don't understand the consequences in a place like Lisdoonvarna, of which there are many. And we're going to see it. We are going to see it sooner or later. So, but on the contrary, or to the contrary, there are a lot of Irish nationalists who are rising up as well, running, and there's a lot of support for them. And perhaps as well, maybe to kind of tie a bow on this, is that the more you end up with, let's say, some Ukrainian being the councillor, how ridiculous is that, in Lisdoonvarna, running openly on the Ukrainian interests, perhaps it's sort of a seesaw type of thing, where the more of that you see, the more Irish people just get over their media brainwashing and stuff and say, oh, really? Okay, well, is that how it is? Well, okay, well, we're going to vote for the Ireland identitarian, so if that's the case. And at the end of the day, no matter how hard we're being replaced, at least for now, based on our just historical demography, there's still a lot of us there. So perhaps, I suppose, to put a good spin on it, which may actually be true, is that the decline, as always, inspires the resistance, or whatever, you know. So that could be the case. But anyway, look, I was hungry tonight, I admit it, and I didn't get much time to prepare, but I said I'd do a stream anyway. Yeah, you know, so let's read super chats anyway. I'm all over the place. Bum, bum, bum. Super chats. So, is this some sort of troll? You know what I mean? This is like, because I know I don't have many mods. I mean, I accept it. Okay, look, someone, this is so a troll on me for sure. Some sort of name I can't pronounce says, but God bless you, and maybe you're a perfectly nice person, and I appreciate your €2.49 super chat. Do not starve, mate. That's in referring to me being hungry. Thanks. Thank you. RJC gives €12, sorry, and no comment. Thank you very much for that. Everything, not the super chats and not any of you, but everything's annoying me tonight. Clicking on things and it doesn't work. Don't allow yourself to be concerned by this. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, error only says don't allow yourself to be coerced by the Civnat carbon copy. Adds only Ukrainian women and children. Always a precursor for the broader scale invasion. I mean, that couldn't be me. I agree. But it's in general for the average person, perhaps that's true. Yeah. Armchair Limerick Nationalist €5 says sound for the ramble. You're very welcome. Yeah, thanks for joining me. I'll be back again soon. Everything's moving so fast. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. So thanks for joining me. As always, take care and ihawa. See ya.